Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone to the Kansas Junior Livestock Show Lead Challenge. My name is Brittany Grother, and I serve on the Lead Challenge competition planning team. Thank you for joining us tonight for our first listen and learn session. And before we get started, I just have a couple housekeeping items to go over. So I know you're all very familiar with Zoom at this point, but please remain muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question that you want to jot down, you're welcome to put it in the chat, and we can ask Kelly as we go, or we can wait until the end to answer questions as well. And then secondly, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of how to get your participation points for tonight. We have links on the Kansas Junior Livestock Show website under the lead challenge page. So where you got the link to join tonight's session, there is a participation survey for each session that we're hosting. And you're just going to click on that link. You'll enter your first and last name and your age division, and then you're going to answer the question that is on the survey. So it's just going to gauge what you learned tonight and show that you participated and listened to the session, but it shouldn't be too stressful. Oh, and Robin put it in the chat as well. It should be live as of 7 o'clock. And we will close it next Saturday. So you have plenty of time to fill it out. All right, so tonight's session is titled How to Keep Livestock Safe in a Foreign Animal Disease Outbreak. And our presenter tonight is Kelly Oliver. She is the Animal Health Planner with the Division of Animal Health at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. So I'll now turn it over to Kelly for her presentation.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And as Brittany said, my name is Kelly Oliver, and I serve as the Animal Health Planner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And this evening, I'm going to visit with you a little bit about how to keep your livestock safe during a foreign animal disease outbreak. So before we get started, I think that there are a few terms that I want to make sure that we fully understand what they mean. And the first one being a foreign animal disease. So a foreign animal disease is a disease that is not known to exist in the United States that could have significant impact on animal health or the economy. The next term I want to make sure that we understand is biosecurity. So this word means procedures intended to protect humans or animals against disease or harmful biological agents. Now, I know biosecurity has kind of been a buzzword lately. I'm sure you've heard a lot of it being used in the news, but it's also a habit. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some good biosecurity habits that maybe you do routinely on your operation. And the purpose of biosecurity is practices that you do everything in your power to reduce the chances of an infectious disease being carried onto your farm. And it also means doing everything in your power to reduce the chances of an infectious disease leaving your farm. So let's look at some of those good habits that I talked about. So it could be as simple as, making sure that you wash your hands. Maybe you need to not share your equipment or tack. Maybe some of you swine exhibitors, when you go to swine farms, you may have been asked to put on some boot covers like you see in the picture, or even stepping into a foot bath. Maybe washing out your trailer is always a good idea. If you take show animals to a show and you bring them back and you have livestock at home, keeping them separated or isolated from each other to make sure that they don't carry anything back to the herd that did not go to the show. But I highlighted one item there in that good habits list that I would challenge you. I think we do a pretty good job of disinfecting things or knowing that we need to disinfect items that come back home after being at a show. But I would challenge you to read the label on the disinfectant that you're using to make sure that you are allowing proper contact time. Because if that disinfectant does not stay on that item long enough, it's not going to work. So I'm sure many of you have come to shows, came home, were cleaning out the trailer, cleaning out the show box, and you realize, man, I brought home a brush or a bucket or a show stick that doesn't belong to me. But then you're also thinking, man, I got a pretty good new item. Well, that's great, but maybe that item might be bringing you a disease or something that you don't want. Maybe it's a cough, maybe it's fungus or ringworm, things like that. And that brush or that show stick or that new item that you picked up and brought home served as what we call a fomite. And a foam mite is just an object or a material that's likely to carry an infection. So it could be that brush or that show stick. It could be your clippers. It could be bedding, the scales, the wash rack, the trailer. All of those items have potential of being considered a foam mite. So why do we need to care about biosecurity? Well, from an exhibitor's perspective, there's diseases out there that can and will impact shows. So in 2015, we battled highly pathogenic avian influenza, where there were no poultry shows allowed in the state of Kansas. In 2020, we had vesicular stomatitis in horses and cattle. And since 2022, we've still been battling highly pathogenic avian influenza in poultry and dairy cattle. So this is why we have vet checks and why they are important. And I know I've seen many of you come through the vet check line, either at State Fair or Junior Livestock Show, and you might seem a little bit nervous, not quite sure what we're looking for. And it's just to protect your animal to make sure that they're healthy and they don't have anything contagious that could spread to other animals that are at the show. Because we know not all shows are terminal and that a lot of these animals go back home and into production. And we certainly don't want them to take something from the show back home. So I share this image with you as a reminder that biosecurity is important and it's crucial in keeping your livestock healthy. Now, when livestock from multiple farms come together at the same event, the risk of a disease being spread goes up. Now, this map, and I know it's a little bit dated, but shows livestock movements into the National Western Stock Show, which is a large livestock show held in Denver every year. And so when livestock from multiple farms, from multiple states come together at that same location, that risk goes up even more. So I know showing is a team effort, but so is biosecurity. And this is the kind of map with animal movements on it that keeps people like myself, a state animal health staff, up at night thinking about the risk that's involved and the diseases that potentially could be spread at these large events. So I'm going to focus on two main foreign animal diseases that are at the top of our list: foot and mouth disease and African swine fever. So I'm going to start with African swine fever. It's also known as ASF. It only impacts the swine. So this is going to include your show pigs, commercial pigs, and even the wild boar population. Foot and mouth disease only impacts your cloven-hooved animals, or your animals with a split hoof, such as cattle, swine, sheep, and goats. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that foot and mouth disease in livestock is not the same as hand, foot, and mouth that humans get. So you might think, these are foreign animal diseases, they're not in the United States. Why should I care, or why is it important to know where they're at in the world? Well, if you look at this map of where African swine fever is currently located nationwide, you will see that we have it in the Dominican Republic. So it's pretty close to the United States, and it's actually a little too close for comfort. So USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture, has put into place what they call the Beagle Brigade. These are dogs that are in our international airports, and they are trained to sniff out any pork products that could be potentially carrying the African swine fever virus. Now, they average about 60,000 pounds of swine products being stopped at these airports that potentially could be bringing in this virus. And so I just share these pictures with you to know that this is what the United States is doing nationwide as an approach to biosecurity and what we're trying to protect ourselves from. So for foot and mouth disease, here's kind of where it's at in the world. We have not had foot and mouth disease in the United States since 1929. Now, I'm going to share a couple pictures with you. I think it's really important for you to know what some of these diseases look like and what their clinical signs are, so you can have an idea of what you would be looking for. So these images are a little bit severe. You can see the lesions on tongues and the udders and the muzzles and the feet. Now, this is not foot and mouth disease. These are Kansas animals that had vesicular stomatitis. Now, these clinical signs do replicate similar to what foot and mouth disease would look like And so it's our job with the state of Kansas to rule out any foreign animal disease. So when these owners of these livestock notice these symptoms, they called us and we came out to test it to make sure that it was not something bad like foot and mouth disease. All of these animals fully recovered as it was vesicular stomatitis. So what would happen if the United States would get either African swine fever or foot and mouth disease? Well, the United States would lose its foreign trade, meaning other countries would ban anything that we would export. Our markets would be heavily impacted. We'd have a lot of movement restrictions and significant economic loss. It's been predicted that if the United States was to get African swine fever or foot and mouth disease, we would lose $200 billion over 10 years. So that's anywhere from 7 billion to 20 billion per disease per year that we would lose. So USDA wanted our producers to be able to have something in place to help protect them from getting something such as foot and mouth disease, which is where the Secure Food Supply Program came into play. So this was a collaboration between industry, state government, USDA, and academia. They kind of all came together and said, we want to provide guidance documents for producers to voluntarily prepare for a foreign animal disease outbreak. And so they started the Secure Food Supply Program. And these are called, the Secure Food Supply Plans is also known as an Enhanced Biosecurity Plan. And it helps producers limit the exposure of their animals and maintain some form of business continuity during an outbreak. And Kansas will lead the nation in promoting secure food supply plans to our producers, which is why Kansas, ironically, is viewed as one of the most prepared states in the nation. And that's something that we really strive to maintain. Now, we know that animal diseases happen primarily at the producer level. However, over time, it's going to impact the end user or the consumer. So I'm sure you've all heard the phrase from farm to fork. Well, it's everyone in the middle that we're going to try to keep safely in business during a foreign animal disease outbreak. So our goal is business continuity, which just means that you can do some form of business during an outbreak. So there's two parts to an enhanced biosecurity plan. These are national templates, and the first part of the plan is a written portion. There's 11 questions. They're operation specific and completely customizable to fit your specific operation. The second part is a map, and I will touch on that here in just a second. But with the first part, they're completely customizable, asking about your daily biosecurity practices and things that you normally do on a day-to-day basis. So when I sit down and visit with our Kansas producers, I find that most of them already do some sort of biosecurity, whether they really want to call it biosecurity or not. They have things already in place. So they're already wearing their farm dedicated shoes. They're already washing their hands. They're already keeping track of who stops by to visit. They're cleaning their office out. They're cleaning their barn. They're keeping track of movement records as well. These enhanced biosecurity plans just add an extra layer of it. So they're taking it up a notch, and they are they're putting on paper how they're going to control people coming on and off of their operation. They're going to control vehicles. They don't want people or vehicles to serve as that fomite of bringing on a virus into their operation. They make plans to clean and disinfect every piece of equipment that may need to go onto their operation, so it doesn't serve as a fomite as well. So this is the map portion, so the second part of an enhanced biosecurity plan. This is the largest component to the plan. And when we put a map together, we identify a line of separation, which is that red line on the outside of this operation. We view everything on the inside of that red line as clean and everything on the outside as dirty. And nothing can cross over that red line without being properly cleaned and disinfected. So it's a little bit easier when we look at it like this. So if you think of that castle as your operation, and you think of that moat around it, or the blue line around that castle as the line of separation, you have full control of what goes on and off of your operation. So when we put it back on an aerial map like this, we are identifying where our access points or our drawbridge is going to be to let things on and off of our operation. We're going to identify where we're going to clean and disinfect equipment that needs to come on. We're going to identify where all those vehicles are going to park, how we're going to get commodity trucks on and off of the farm without carrying anything on that we don't want. So this image is from an operation that practiced standing up their enhanced biosecurity plan. And so for their line of separation, they used large square bales. So you can see that in the bottom image along that bunk line, they have large square bales, and that was their barrier for their line of separation. They posted signs and closed some gates like you can see in the other image. And they also used some rope to mark off some commodity bays that they did not want any truck drivers to use. So that's what it kind of looks like when it is stood up. Now, we know that every biosecurity measure that we put into place may not be perfect. We're humans, we make mistakes. Things might slip through the cracks, but every biosecurity measure that we put in place will help prevent, the potential risk of a virus coming onto our operation. So during a foreign animal disease outbreak, the Kansas Animal Health Commissioner will put into place a stop movement order, which means for 72 hours, no livestock will be allowed to move. Once the Animal Health Commissioner says, hey, I think things are kind of safe to start moving livestock again, then producers will have to request a movement permit. And in order to qualify for a movement permit, a secure food supply plan will be required. Along with that movement request, they will have to provide us 14 days worth of animal movement records and 14-day visitor log. Now, the 14 days come from the incubation period of the foot and mouth disease outbreak or a virus. Their statement from your veterinarian will also need to be submitted stating that this plan has been stood up and it is in place. Now, with the stop movement order, we have to be aggressive, and we're going to be aggressive because that's the only way that we're going to be able to get ahead of a virus and protect our industry. So if it's day one of the stop movement order and you can't provide 14 days worth of movement records, we're not going to allow you to move until you can provide us 14 days worth of records. And there are templates on the Secure Food Supply website that will help you get started if that's something that you would like to start keeping track of. Now, you're probably thinking we only have a few head of livestock, we're way too small of an operation for something like this. And I will be the first person to tell you, diseases don't care how many head of livestock you have. So every operation, when their main goal is to raise safe and wholesome product to help feed the world, those are the operations that need to have a secure food supply plan. So no size does not matter when it comes to biosecurity. And I highly encourage every operation in the state of Kansas, even exhibitors as well, to have secure food supply plans. So with that, these are the links that take you to each of the respective websites for more information. And Brittany, I will gladly open it up for questions.
Sure. Anyone who has questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to type them in the chat. Kelly, I have one to start with. When you talk about movement restrictions and stop movement, how would you define movement? Like, our animals are obviously grazing in our pastures and things like that. So what would you consider movement that has to be stopped?
Yeah, great question. So if you need to take an animal to the vet to get looked at, that's a movement off of your property. If you want to go to the sale barn and buy animals and bring them home, that's a movement. Any livestock that leaves your facility and goes to another location is a movement that would need to be permitted or would be stopped during a stop movement order.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so you talked about what we are doing to prevent the outbreaks. If a farm does test positive for one of those diseases, what's the procedure for that farm?
Great question. So what we will have to do is if an operation tests positive, more than likely we're going to have to depopulate or euthanize those animals to prevent the spread of the disease. So not the fun answer, but it's the reality, and that's the only way that we can stop the spread of the disease.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Are there any like vaccinations or anything like that that you can give to an animal that can like prevent this, or is this like completely viral and there's really no way to stop it?
Yeah, so there is a vaccination. The problem with doing it ahead of time is that we don't know the strain. So we don't know specifically what vaccine is going to work for this strain of the virus. So until we get that first positive and we can run samples and know exactly what the makeup of that virus is, then we can get the vaccination or vaccine ready to go. There are some vaccine banks in North America that hold basically the basic makeup of the vaccine. And then once we know what strain is needed, then we can send it off, get it made, and get it out across the United States. But as of right now, no, there is not a vaccination that we could do ahead of time to prevent this.
Kelly has a follow-up question. Is that for both foot and mouth disease and African swine fever that we have a vaccine bank?
That is for foot and mouth disease only at this time. They are working on a vaccine for African swine fever, but to my knowledge, it is not finalized yet.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
If a farm is found that they have one of those diseases, does the euthanization only affect their farm, or does it affect farms in the area also?
So that is a very good question. It will impact the area around that farm. We do what we call a control area. So we will go 6.21 miles around the positive operation, and we will be doing high surveillance in that area to see what other animals are around there and if we need to euthanize them as well. Just kind of depending on their clinical signs and status at that point in time. But yes, you could fall in that control area, so your animals may be perfectly healthy, but if you are in that control area or that 6.21 mile range of a positive, you could be impacted and just be under high surveillance at that time.
You've got some good questions, Kelly. And does anybody else have any questions for Kelly while she's here?
I have a question. Are there any websites
For tracking
for tracking
diseases.
diseases?
So USDA usually has on their website any current diseases. I know the World Health Organization will have global diseases on their website as well. Kansas will put specific stuff on our website, so agriculture.ks.gov. So anything going on within the state of Kansas, like the highly pathogenic avian influenza right now, we do have a map on our website that shows that. But anything either global or nationwide, USDA would probably be the best website to look for to see what's going on out there.
Um, are all these security things just for Kansas or for all over the United States?
Great question. So they are for nationwide, so all states in the US. Every state has somebody designated to help their producers write their enhanced biosecurity plans. So I work with our Kansas producers in writing these plans for those in Kansas, but other states have somebody like me that will help them as well.
Right, last call for questions for Kelly. All right, Kelly, one last thing. Like, what would be your one takeaway from your presentation that you want everyone to remember tonight?
Don't share your equipment with other people. I know you want to be helpful and friendly, and that's kind of the great thing that we want to do. But just know that it's putting your livestock at risk by sharing equipment, sharing tack. It's so human nature to help each other, but make sure you're disinfecting things in between, and have designated barn shoes. That's my takeaway. If you can just do one thing, have designated barn shoes. Those shoes that you only wear in your barn, not to your neighbors, not to your friends, and disinfect your equipment if you decide to share it.
Well, I just want to give a huge thank you to Kelly tonight for taking time to talk to us on how to prepare for a foreign animal disease outbreak and keep our animals safe. And so I hope you all have enjoyed her presentation. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure Kelly's got her email address here. She'd be happy to answer them at another time. But I just want to remind everyone now that our presentation is over to please go and complete your participation survey. So you get those points. There is a survey link in the chat. And if you don't see it there, it's also on the Kansas Junior Livestock Show website on the lead challenge page. And we hope that you will join us tomorrow for our second listen and learn session. And that one is going to be called Gaining Experience in the Agriculture Workforce. So thank you again to Kelly. Thank you everyone who joined us live tonight to participate and ask questions, and have a good rest of your evening.